a special online calendar called the Hopkinton Planner. What makes it so special is that it is updated and kept timely by the community groups dedicated to making Hopkinton the great place that it is. Here at HCAM, we strive to power the communications of our local clubs and organizations, and this is one important way we do that. So please, check it out.
Just a minute, folks.
It's Dive-In Drive-In time, and we got a great Western for you today.
Dive-In Drive-In is a new program featuring the HCAM staff's favorite B movies. We hope you'll enjoy these treasured films of yesteryear.
Even if we don't get paid, there ain't no job we trade. We're hauling freight and stations ain't no longer Santa Fe.
So check out the HCAM TV website at hcam.tv for movie days and showtimes.
Hi, welcome to Great Gardens.
And I know Vinod has to leave at 6:15. So Matt, oh Bob, we got there's like a whole team here today.
Yeah, we're live.
We're like, they can hear me too? Oh, awesome. It's good. I didn't need warning about that or anything.
He did.
All right.
We heard it.
Oh, he did? Okay. Well, so you guys are looking out for me too. Yeah.
I thought that was your opening.
Okay.
Shut it off if you want.
Nope, we're good. We're good. That's what we call a cold open. So we are going to call to order the Monday, June 5th meeting of the Elementary School Building Committee. First of all, I want to thank everyone, both from our professional staff, our professional district staff, committee members, HCAM, for responding to the call out for a meeting so quickly at an odd time. We received a copy of the draft traffic report last week, and given that we're going to talk about it at our public forum this Wednesday, we thought, given its density, that it made sense to have the committee have an opportunity to ask questions of our traffic engineer. So from an agenda perspective, discussing the traffic report is the entirety of our agenda this evening. So we will get right into it. I know Vinod has a hard stop at 6:15. Is that correct? Yep. Okay. So we will try to be, well, I say we'll try to be as efficient as possible. We have one agenda item, so let's go. Do we want to, do you want to do a presentation ahead of time, or are we just going right into Q&A?
We have a couple of traffic.
Oh, he is a
Great,
presentation.
let's do that. Awesome.
Here you go.
So thanks everyone, and thanks for accommodating the time request. I have a hearing in Sutton tonight, so I was hoping I'd get there from here. So since I was last here, we finished the expanded traffic study for the corridor, and obviously we still call it a draft report, but it's comprehensive, as you would have seen. A lot of data, a lot of analyses. But the key, I know, for this group and in general about the project is what the recommendations are, or what the outcome of the study is that we came up with. So I do have some data slides up front that we looked at previously, but I'll just quickly go through those. This graphic shows you the locations we included in the study, starting all the way up by Pleasant Street at Grove Street intersection, going all the way down to the Chestnut Street intersection. Each of those dots represent either a driveway or a roadway intersection that's key to the schools in the corridor. So those are all our study areas. We looked at timeframes. that overlap both not only the times for the elementary schools and middle schools, but elementary schools, but also we looked at the times when the middle school and the high school peaks, just because of some of the time changes that are going to be happening with some of the grades that are going to be shifted from one location to the other. We saw this last time. One of the key things that lead to confusion to some degree and maybe non-compliance of drivers as it relates to speed limits in the corridor is just the number of times the speed limits change and at what times of the day they change. It's all over the place. So that's possibly one of the reasons why you see some degree of speeding during school times when there isn't rolling queues or congestion on the corridor. One thing related to speeds, the posted speed limits, the underlying posted speed limit for the corridor along the schools is 40 miles per hour, and people are driving it at 40, even though during school hours there are some school zones that require people to slow down to 20. It doesn't happen all the time. And that may be because of some of the speeds jumping all over the place along the corridor. We looked at this graph that talks about, this is Hayden Row Street traffic volumes, hourly traffic flow. So the x-axis is the hourly traffic volume. The hours of the day, and then the y-axis is the hourly traffic volume, number of cars per hour or vehicles per hour. And these lines that you see here represents the times when the elementary schools start in the morning, and then the high school, middle school start time, which happens earlier in the day. And then similarly in the afternoon, you have the elementary school dismissal time, and then the high school, middle school dismissal time. One of the things that is going to happen with this project, concurrent with it, is the shift in grade 6 from the middle school to Hopkins, and then obviously the move of the 4th grade from Hopkins to the new Elmwood School, but also the change in time. So Hopkins would have its start and end times rather than coincide with the elementary schools, will coincide with the middle school and high school. So we wanted to make sure that those temporal changes were also studied as part of the analysis, so we can take into account any mitigation that's needed to make those shifts work. So a few quick things, what we included here. We looked at the future projections. So not only is this analysis based on what's happening at the schools today, we have the MSBA projections that go out 10 years. So we actually did the analysis assuming that the numbers would grow up to those future numbers in the future, in the future conditions. So that's what the analysis is based on. We reassigned the 4th grade traffic from Hopkins to the new school, 6th grade from the middle school to Hopkins, changed the start and end times of Hopkins School so that the traffic numbers make sense during each of the hours that we look at it. We contacted the town to take into account other planned projects in the area, because those projects also add traffic to the roadway system. We did not specifically get into multimodal accommodations like the trails in our analysis, although, if and when there is a multimodal path of some sort through this area, that would help, but we did not assume that that's going to be there as part of our analysis. As one of the slides that you would have seen before about the enrollment and by grade, and the numbers do grow pretty significantly over the next 10 years. So some of the key findings: drivers are adhering to the underlying speed limit of about 40 miles per hour, but not as much with the school zone, the 20 mile per hour speed limits during school hours. The Chestnut Street signal had historically a high crash incidence, but that intersection obviously was improved and signalized in 2018. That reduced the crash incidence noticeably since then. One of the things we noticed is that, the left turns entering Marathon School, so southbound, if you're heading south on Hayden Row, entering the Marathon School driveway, those do tend to get pretty long, especially when the buses are lining up. So we wanted to make sure that we came up with a solution for that. Obviously, there are crossing guards at multiple locations, and their job, although they're supposed to only control traffic when the students are crossing, they're also acting as traffic cops, which is not really part of their job description, but they do help with some of the traffic flow. Oops, sorry. They do help with the traffic flow along the corridor from time to time. So given the volume of traffic we'd be dealing with between the two schools, Marathon School and the New Elmwood School, we did find with the analysis that there is a strong benefit of traffic improvement that you could achieve when the two school parking lots of the school circulation is connected internally, so you don't have to come out onto Hayden Row Street to travel between the two driveways, and that does help with providing a lot of flexibility in terms of how you can manage traffic in the future. The analysis does show that we would need to look at some improvements on Hayden Row Street between the two school driveways, and have a plan that gets into that. In fact, shifting the grades, 4th grade and 6th grade between the different schools does have actually some beneficial effect on traffic flow because of the change in times. There is a safety zone regulation. I know one of the previous meetings there was a question, but is there something we could do to standardize the speeds, not have different speeds along the corridor? And there are mechanisms that are available to do that, but it might need to be tied to a post-construction monitoring, because when you implement certain improvements, whether it's traffic calming or traffic signal control, that does change the speed profile for the road. So the state requires that you look at traffic speeds after an improvement plan is implemented and then decide on next steps. So the speed zone regulation, which does help make the speeds along the corridor more uniform, might need to be taken up as a post-construction monitoring effort and not upfront. We did look at the effect of the new school in this project in general along the corridor for the other driveways and other intersections up and down Hayden Row. And generally, the impacts are relatively minimal and manageable in terms of what needs to be done at those locations. So what we have here, quickly jumping to the overall recommendation. See if I can zoom in into this plan. So this plan, what you have here, shows the overall recommendation for the corridor. I'll start with the zoomed out view and then can zoom in.
So before Vinod jumps into that, this is an update from what's in your packet. There was an initial draft circulated on Friday with the initial draft study. Some feedback from the project team has made its way back to the traffic consultant. So this is an updated version of the mitigation proposal for the Hayden Row Street. So there were some changes to the one in your packet.
Thanks, Jeff. So north is to the left, Chestnut Street is just outside of this graphic to the right. So one of the key recommendations coming out of this study for the Hayden Row corridor would be the potential for traffic signal control at the Marathon School driveway. And then the new driveway that's shown right here for the new school would be unsignalized, but there would be a left turn restriction. So the traffic coming out of the driveway would be limited to right turn only. So we looked at different layouts and different turn restrictions and different controls for the two intersections to figure out which one provides the optimal flow in traffic, and what you see on this plan we feel is an optimal combination. So we can get into some of the specifics of what each plan shows, and then we can kind of break out into Q&A at that point. So when you look at the intersection of the Marathon driveway with Hayden Row Street, in addition to a fully signalized intersection, we are also looking at the potential for extending the turn lane. So the current turn lane, the left turn pocket, is only about 175 feet or so. It's less than 200 feet. And as you know, it does spill back past the available storage lane, and that interferes with the southbound traffic on Hayden Row Street, the through traffic. So this plan calls for extending that storage length to 400 feet. So it's more than double the length, and all of that can be accommodated within the public right-of-way. There are no wetland fillings or anything of that type. There are wetlands out in this area, so the work out at the northerly end of what you see on this plan does fall within the Conservation Commission jurisdiction, but that would be mostly work within buffers, wetland buffers. So there would be no fillings associated with this plan. But again, the 400-foot queue is, again, designed to accommodate the future projections and enrollment, not only just for Marathon, but also to Elmwood, as well as all other schools along the corridor. The signalization does a few things. In addition to better accommodating the turning traffic into and out of the Marathon driveway at that intersection, we are able to introduce a fully pedestrian push-button actuated crosswalk. So today, obviously, that's controlled by crossing guard. You would presume you may still need a crossing guard, but not as much manual intervention, because this would be a fully actuated signal, and there'll be push buttons for students to push to cross the street and get to the Marathon driveway. And these little triangular symbols that you see on the graphic are traffic signal heads, essentially. So there'd be signal heads facing the traffic heading east. There'll be, heading south, and then signal heads facing traffic north, as well as signal heads facing the Marathon driveway, as well as a signal head facing this residential driveway directly across from the Marathon school. But this would be a fully signalized four-way intersection once it's up and running. Again, you'll see that the red lines represent the layout lines and the property lines for the properties in the area. You'll see that all of the improvements fall within the public right-of-way for Hayden Row Street. We are holding on this graphic the west edge of the road, so the curb line and the sidewalk on the west side of Hayden Row Street stays as is, and all of the widening is towards the east. And so this blue line that you see along the edge is the new edge of road or edge of pavement on the east side of Hayden Row Street once this improvement goes into effect. The other key improvement on this plan that you'll see is the provision of a new left turn lane on Hayden Row Street, pretty long left turn lane at the new site driveway. This would be an unsignalized driveway. We don't, once you signalize the Marathon driveway, that provides the break in traffic to be able to efficiently operate an unsignalized driveway for the new school farther to the south. But traffic that in the morning when parents are coming in to drop off students at the new Elmwood School, they can use this new turn lane without needing to stack in the through lane on Hayden Row Street to be able to turn into the new school driveway. The two school driveways are connected internally, so if someone wanted to use this signalized left turn lane to go in, for example, drop off one child at Marathon and then go to the new Elmwood School, the internal connection between the two schools accommodates that, so that parent doesn't have to come out onto Hayden Row Street. But parents that want to go directly to the new Elmwood School can just stay in the through lane and then use the new left turn lane to enter the school. So that this does provide a lot of flexibility in terms of how you enter the two schools. But it also, in the same fashion, it also helps with traffic exiting the schools as well. You're coming out, for example, of the new driveway. If your destinations are points to the north, which is predominantly the majority of the traffic towards Main Street, or points north, you could come out of this driveway and make a right turn only and head north. or if someone wants to make a left turn, they could use the internal connection between the two driveways, come down the Marathon driveway and use the left turn signal. So the left turns coming out of both schools would have a protected phase in a traffic signal to be able to make that turn by means of that internal connection between the two schools. We are also calling for a crosswalk at the new school driveway intersection, and this would have the RRFBs, the flashing beacon indications, the post-mounted indications that you have at other locations in town. But those would be push-button actuated, and students would be able to cross, and there'd be a sidewalk that runs along the new driveway into the new school for pedestrians to cross Hayden Row Street and enter the school if they choose to do that here, and also obviously the signalized crossing that's at Marathon School. One of the benefits of this plan that you don't currently have because there is no signal in this section of Hayden Row Street is that this signalized intersection does provide breaks in traffic when traffic is coming out of the side street, out of the Marathon driveway, to the point that it helps the residents in this area of Hayden Row Street to be able to actually turn more efficiently in the future than what might have been happening today, where there's continuous flow of traffic, and I've heard there were concerns or complaints about residents not being able to turn out of private driveways, and that will be improved a little bit with the traffic signal providing some breaks in the traffic flow. I think that generally covers it. Is there anything else that?
No, we just wanted to open up to the committee for
Yeah.
questions, give time to ask questions in advance of the committee forum.
The overall finding is that this plan can support the combined traffic for the two schools with the growth projected for the next 10 years.
Well, thank you. Just given our time frame, and I'm imagining that there are probably some questions here, maybe I'll make this a little more organized than I usually do, and I'll start with the committee and kind of go in order. So start with Mike.
Yeah. So the new left turn lane, or extended left turn lane going into Marathon, is going to require widening the road.
That's right.
And all the utility poles are on that side that you want to
Good
widen.
point. Yes.
We moved 3 poles when we built the school, so it's going to necessitate coordinating with Eversource, which is an outrageously bad deal, to complicate it, just so everybody knows that. Interesting enough, when the school Marathon was first proposed, that intersection was signalized. Do you remember that?
That was before me,
Yeah, well,
but I heard,
I do.
we went to-
I heard that.
We went to the planning board, except for one member said, why do you want to do that? Why don't you just do it the way you've been doing? Hire some guy out there to wave his arms, so that's what we did. Planning board said, you don't need this thing. But I think Jeff will recall that we put the conduit under the road for the signal anyway. And knowing that, someday we might need it, so that could help a little bit.
That's helpful.
The entire distance between Marathon and the new Elmwood, the school zone will encompass both of those. There won't be any break. It'll be just a longer school
There've
zone.
been overlap, and in fact, if we go with this safety zone
Yeah.
provision, you can actually extend it for the full corridor. You can start all the way up at Pleasant and go past the new school driveway with a single zone.
Yeah.
But that's to be determined based on monitoring. But one thing I do want to mention to your point about there being a signal there before.
Yeah.
When
No,
you look
it
at the
never was. It was proposed.
proposal for a signal, just the Marathon traffic by itself would not justify the installation of signals. So it was a good idea to install the conduit back then, but now that you have 2 schools, that does give you the justification. And you're right, there would be a bunch of utility poles that will need to be relocated along the corridor.
Thank you.
Yep.
Bill?
Again, thank you for the information. A couple of questions. Who decides if a signal can be added?
Usually, if it's a DOT-controlled roadway, obviously Mass DOT would control that. But in a town-controlled roadway, usually the Board of Selectmen, they're the road commissioners in most communities. So the final sign-off would need to come from the Board of Selectmen. But usually there's multiple steps before you get to them for a sign-off. So it'd be your DPW, or if your Traffic Commission, and other entities within town who would review the merits of the proposal, and they will look at what is referred to as the warrant analysis. You look at the justification, and if it makes sense, and in this case, we believe, given the amount of traffic we're dealing with and the two existing signals, which are quite far apart, I think creating a signalized intersection in the middle helps.
Okay, thanks. I just want to make sure I understood it's a town decision, not
It's a town decision.
a highway department or something like that, or I meant
Yeah, it's not
a
DOT.
state decision.
Yeah, it's not a state decision.
With all that you're proposing here and all the costs involved, who absorbed those costs? Is that part of the whole school project, or is this a town commitment for all of these improvements, widening roads and signals and so on?
So there is congestion today, as you know, again, at the Marathon School driveway, the spillbacks, and obviously the signal would help Marathon School along with all other schools as well. Traffic will flow more smoothly, and there'd be more of a traffic calming effect with signalized control. So I would say it would almost be like a proportional benefit. Like, so the new school would get a certain amount of benefit out of these improvements, but also the existing schools, including Marathon, would also benefit from this. So if you looked at it from that perspective, so it's not an all or nothing saying it's not all because, it's not all of the new school that's going to benefit from it, and it's not just the existing schools that would benefit from this. Order of magnitude, we were looking at it at one point, might be like a 60-40 split. So the new school would benefit, let's say, 60% from the improvements that you see on this plan, and the district in general outside of the new school could benefit with the remaining 40%. So for every dollar you spend, 40 cents might benefit the district, and then 60 cents would benefit the new school.
Okay. And my last, just to follow up on that is, and I should have been more clear, will this be included in what we're doing here as a group, or will there be another article that will have to come up at a town meeting for an additional X amount of money to do some of these costs? That's what I'm trying to understand. How is that?
There are multiple ways you could actually do it, but because of the 60-40 split that Vinod is talking about, the project itself would necessitate these improvements, so that it would most likely be included as part of the project ask, as part of the delivery of making sure the traffic works as part of the overall proposal. You can split off separate projects, whether it's this topic or others. If something is an upgrade to a corridor, it can be a separate ask at town meeting, but this one probably fits in the requirement for the project to include.
Thank you.
So I think sorry.
No, go ahead, Nancy.
The helpful explanation on the 60-40 split, but also on the way it would be funded. I think this and all of the information in here is really pivotal to a lot of residents in town, that the traffic be at least not worse than it is right now, but it sounds like it could improve the overall conditions with the extended turn lanes and the signalization. Is that for the average person going through town?
That's a valid statement.
Okay.
And these are, again, being designed for the 10-year projections. Yep. So year one, it would be a much better traffic flow, and then slowly the added capacity would get used as the enrollment grows up.
And when you're looking at enrollment, and this is probably a trickier question, in looking at how the enrollment is climbing, my assumption would be that the amount of traffic that's going through town would also be increasing in some proportional kind of way, because the kids come with parents and other adults with them. Is that factored in as well?
Yes. Yeah, we just, again, if I understood the question correctly, we estimate the enrollment increase and what that translates to for hourly traffic flow, and then we spread the traffic along the corridor and at intersections. So, when we study an intersection, let's say Pleasant at Grove, it's not just how much traffic is going through there today. We also estimated what the traffic would be at that intersection 10 years from now, and that's what we studied.
Great. Thank you.
Shadul?
Yeah, thank you. Nice presentation. Thank you for all the information. I have a couple. First one is along the line that Nancy was mentioning in your last statement, which is there a way to project or quantify in some ways that if we take the current state of the traffic as a baseline, by applying and optimizing all these, is it going to accommodate the projected growth that we have currently in numbers in a way that it'll stay as is or improve by an X%, or it's an optimal best case scenario, but we really don't know?
So the way the methodology works, we have to assume a future condition. So it's not like we could turn off the enrollment growth, right? So whether or not this project happens, there would be the enrollment increase. So we assume the traffic projections associated with that. And then we look at what improvements are needed to support those numbers. So at this point, the improvement plan is not constrained by any physical limitation. So it's not like the analysis didn't say we needed 2 lanes somewhere, and I'm not saying that we can only put in 1 lane because there are wetlands there or there's some other constraint. So this plan is an unconstrained improvement plan that's designed for that 10-year projection. So I would say this would, at a minimum, offset the impacts of this project, and if anything, as you mentioned, it'd be an improvement over the current conditions.
Okay.
In terms of the operations.
So we should expect as is or better?
Or better.
Okay, that's very helpful. Thank you.
Because the traffic study guidelines generally require that you don't make things worse, right? So if we were to, obviously, but if anything that we could do to improve the current deficiencies, that's better. So, but at a minimum, we'd want to offset this project's impacts, which will definitely happen with this plan. And obviously, there are a lot of other on-site considerations that we would need to take into account. But this plan also will help some of the existing deficiencies unrelated to this project.
That's great to hear. And in general, I would assume you don't have any numbers yet, right? What the cost would be for doing all of these and how the 60-40 split could potentially...
Yeah, we haven't done any estimates.
They don't reimburse for this stuff.
Yeah, right. It's a bit, but, right, yeah. So that's a good point. Would we assume that this after the 60-40 split, it would be an add-on delta to what the current project budget is, and then the 40 would be an add-on to our DPW?
So I think that, again, there are multiple ways you could do this. I think the project itself would come up with the total project cost of that element, and we would isolate it. And I think the messaging to the town is that, the project, this improvement benefits the project, but 60% of that value is really necessitated because of this project, and we're isolating what that other value is. But I think it would be likely a single vote as part of the overall project cost, and the full cost would be baked into the overall project cost for the Elmwood at the town meeting ask.
Excellent. No, thank you. I think that's, of course, more to discuss and evolve. Now, the last one, given your experience and expertise in this area, do you have a scenario or an example of similar complex situation that you have done and have seen improvements?
But I work on a lot of different types of developments, not just school projects.
Right.
Say an example probably a lot more complicated than this, I would say, is the Speen Street corridor in Natick. It's between Route 30 and Route 9, if you're familiar with that section. Mm-hmm. Compared to, I have worked along that corridor on projects over the last 15, 20 years, and compared to what the traffic flow was, let's say 15 years ago to what it is now, it's much higher. But solutions like this, new signals, turn lanes, signal coordination, synchronization of traffic signals, adaptive technologies, there are a lot of things both on the technology side as well as geometric improvements that you can implement to see how things improve. And I would probably use that as an example if we wanted to see a really complicated corridor with a lot of improvements before and after. Speen Street would be a good example. But yeah, I probably work on these types of things quite often.
Certainly traffic lights get introduced at a lot of school projects, depending on the size of the overall. In the town of Natick, we replaced their middle school on a campus that had the middle school and the elementary school, and they had an unsignalized intersection, and we created a pocket lane for the left turn signalized intersection, and that improved the flow of traffic, which was an arterial corridor connecting other things. So there are past experiences where that's been successful in other towns.
Great.
And a lot of times it's not just traffic signals, right? We look at adding new roadways or new roadway connections. Like, for example, with working with the same team in Easton, came up with a new connector road that cuts through a complicated school complex, multiple schools in the same neighborhood, and that was intended to ease traffic congestion for multiple schools. So each project has a different challenge or an issue to resolve, but yeah, traffic signals and geometric improvements like this are a quite common type of solution.
Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, thanks.
Jigger?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. First is making a left from coming out of the Marathon Driveway going south towards the private road there. Does that section need a roadway expansion too?
Chairman, I'm sorry, which?
You turn left right out of the existing Marathon Driveway, right there.
This left turn?
Yeah. So that section of the road between the Marathon Driveway and I think there's a private.
It's Chamberlain, right?
Chamberlain.
Yes, Chamberlain, that right there. Yeah. No, come up more. Yeah.
Oh, farther up here.
No, turn in left. I think just to be able to. You're talking about to be able to. Swing
right here.
Yeah.
Talking about this stretch.
Yeah. So yes, this plan calls for between the Marathon Driveway and the new driveway, there would be a widening of Hayden Row Street by about a lane width.
Okay.
Because today it's one lane north, one lane south. We would be introducing essentially this left turn lane in the middle. So essentially it would be 2 lanes south, 1 lane north. So about 1 lane with the widening.
I just needed confirmation because it's kind of hard to tell just based on the blue line.
Yep.
So. My other question is, when you design the turn lane, I see it's an extended turn lane, making a left into Marathon, and that's sufficient to accommodate school buses and cars as well?
That is correct. Yep. Yeah, this is 400 feet long, and currently it's about 175 feet. So it's more than double the length, so it would accommodate the buses and cars. And the traffic model that we use does take into account the difference in the size of the vehicles. Obviously, school bus being much longer than a car, so it does take that into account.
And then the entrance into that turn lane is pretty close to, looks like a private driveway, all the way to the north.
Not the end.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Is it McDermott?
Yeah, that street there.
Yep.
I was wondering if from a technical standpoint, there's any concerns with the entrance into that turn lane being so close to that traffic exiting from that private driveway, merging into.
Yeah, I mean, I understand the question correctly. So if you're traveling south on Hayden Row Street, you'd essentially be in this lane. And as you get past this point, the pavement starts widening, and then you see the opening of the left turn pocket. But cars can enter that left turn pocket anywhere along this length. And our queues, the maximum queue that we anticipate in the future conditions would not fill up this entire lane. So, I mean, we could have extended this even farther to the north if needed, but we felt that 400 feet is probably a reasonable length. And based on the design that you see here, someone turning into or out of this private road should not have any issues with the traffic that's essentially diverging at this point to get into a left turn pocket.
Yeah, I was thinking of those one-off cases where maybe there's some spillage from the left turn lane into the through lane, and maybe it's long enough.
Yeah, I mean, we would. This is at a concept level now, and before this actually gets built, we would need to go through a full design, and the design would be accompanied by additional analysis. And if at that point this turn lane needs to be a little bit longer or whatever, we would be able to accommodate that. It's doable, but right now, based on the numbers we are seeing, spillback from this turn lane should not be an issue 10 years from now.
Then one final question I had is, when you look at traffic counts in designing these lanes, do you look at a regular school day or are there occasions, and I can think of good examples where traffic might be heavier than usual, and Like just as a contingency, do you account for?
So, yeah, we do look at typical conditions. I don't have the exact dates of when these counts were done, but these were done. The additional traffic data collection was actually done a couple of months ago. So all these analyses are based on data collected when schools were in session. And they would sometimes, the roadway counts are actually done over multiple days. So the day-to-day fluctuation would usually be captured in some of those multi-day counts. And there are seasonal adjustment factors that so to your question about, what happens like at other times of the year, there are times when there could be a spike. So there are seasonal adjustment factors and other adjustments that we would make to make sure that the numbers we are using is not underestimating the data that we are using.
So you have a range, and then you pick some numbers for your design traffic counts based on that.
Something reasonable. Yeah, usually it's referred to as the 85th percentile.
Okay.
Is generally what we would use for most design purposes.
Sure, yeah.
But in this instance, I would say our traffic counts with the seasonal adjustments, if applicable, is reasonable to use for the design of these improvements.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Tiffany?
No, I didn't have any questions. It's just good to hear that it'll improve the overall traffic conditions, and that the ideas that you have will offset the impact that the new building might have and the increased traffic there. So thank you for your time and your projections.
I have a couple, and then Mike, I know you had one more, so I'll just get mine in. And so first off, what you're showing here is obviously Hayden Row specific, but as you were describing it sounds like there's some optionality for people who are dropping off at either or both of the schools in terms of how they go in and come out.
Right.
I assume this study also considered the site piece, or is that done separately?
So yeah, it does factor the site configuration into account, and we are working with the design team to actually come up with the circulation diagrams that show what needs to happen at each driveway. So if you're a parent coming from the north going to Marathon, what would be the entry pattern, what would be the exit pattern. And so we're actually developing graphics that actually clearly call those out.
Okay, because far from optimal design, but when I look at like our high school, middle school pickup and drop off, there are a lot of different options, and I'm surprised there aren't accidents every day in terms of the way people are crossing each other. So I think I was expecting, not that it should be, but I was expecting a little bit more of a kind of a one-way through, but you think this will be clear for people to not have too many crossovers and such.
Right. So one thing I do want to mention is as part of most of these designs, especially in school settings, you would want to maintain as much flexibility as possible in the design, and that's one of the things that's actually built into this. So the multiple entry points, the multiple exit points, and the internal connection as opposed to just having to come out to Hayden Row Street to go between one drive and the other. All of that provides that opportunity, and quite often there is a post-construction monitoring phase when things settle down after the first 2 months or after the first 3 months. You do have to go back and revisit some of these assumptions. For example, let's say on is that right turn only restriction the most appropriate limitation, or can we make some changes there?
Okay.
So what we have come up with works with all of our projections and everything, but there's always room for adjustments and fine-tuning. And we don't want to preclude a future change at this stage, and that's that flexibility that I was mentioning. We built that into the design so that if something needs to change with the circulation plan after the fact, there is an opportunity to do that.
Okay. With the traffic signal, is there an in-between option between what we have today, which is, as you mentioned, we have, I don't know what the right term is, but somebody who's controlling traffic specifically for pedestrians and buses, versus, if you get off at the TJX building in Marlboro at 5 o'clock and there's a police officer there who is directing traffic. Like, is there benefit to exploring an in-between option? Because like Mike, I'm remembering the conversation with the gentleman whose house is right there about putting a traffic light right in the middle, and that's a significant change to that lot.
Yeah, the other option would be to have details like that, controlling traffic just for that 40 minutes or 50 minutes when you have the spike in traffic. But what I would say is a lot of these types of signals, if it's a DOT signal, they would control and they would say, no, you can't, put them into flashing during the daytime. But if it's a town-controlled signal, you could run this as a fully actuated signal, let's say 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours in the evening, and then the rest of the time it could be a flashing signal, so you're not interrupting traffic flow as much during other hours of the day.
Yeah, I think my concern was more the giant pole that we're dropping in this guy's front yard. But yeah, I think that's which look, if it's the right thing to do, then we have to sell it. But that's why I was wondering if there are options in between the signal and what we have today. And it sounds like there might be, but maybe we have to explore what the benefits.
I mean, if it's a different location of the mast arm, like you would go into, let's say, into the northeast corner of the intersection to be aware, so you could consider that. And I mean, again, it's a function of visibility of the signal heads and a whole bunch of other things, but there are ways to design the traffic signal at this intersection to be as less intrusive as possible. It would be no different than the signal that you have, quarter mile to the north, but it's possible. But in terms of alternatives, if it wasn't for a traffic signal, then it would be something like a police detail or a person controlling traffic flow.
Okay. Thank you for all of this. The last thing is not a question or even directed at you. It's more town directed to sort of all of us as we think about going forward. We've done a lot of traffic mitigations along this road, like making a no left turn out of the high school, like making a no right on red at the Chestnut Street intersection, and those signs were wasted money. So I think we have to think about how, as a town, we're going to make any of these traffic mitigations actually work so that we can get the benefit of them. Mike, did you have a follow-up?
Yeah, it was my understanding that the MSBA won't partner with us on any of this stuff, right?
It'd be a non-reimbursable items, yeah.
And the question I have in my mind, which you're probably going to get asked Wednesday night, is what kind of costs are we looking at? Are we looking at $2 million, $5 million? Just ballpark. We won't hold you to it, but it's going to be asked.
We haven't run the numbers yet, and if Jeff has, but I would say what I see on this plan, order of magnitude for a typical roadway project, not in Hopkinton, general's probably about $2 million, $2 to $2.5 million.
Okay.
But again, you need to run the numbers. You need to run the numbers to get to the bottom line on that.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
I know you're tight on time, but would it be possible to see if any of the district or town staff have any questions?
Sure. I have another 5 minutes, 5 to 6 minutes.
I'll open it up. Does any district or town staff have any questions or?
Quick questions.
Yeah.
I'm assuming the value proposition here is to resolve congestion.
It is. I would say the primary goal is to make sure that the impacts of the new school are mitigated. That's the primary goal. And once that happens, that's the minimum threshold. Anything over and above that is safety, minimizing congestion, existing congestion, those types of current problems that you have there.
So if that's the case, then what are the resulting levels of service for the intersections, the driveways into the schools coming off Hagen Road, as well as on Chestnut Street and also Hagen Road?
The level of service analysis is in the draft traffic study, but these two intersections in particular, they're probably like A's and B's after these improvements are done. Unsignalized driveways usually have, especially if you have left turns, do show poor operations just because you need a longer gap for left turning traffic. But in this instance, again, with this unsignalized driveway, the new driveway would be restricted to right turn only coming out, and the signalized driveway is fully controlled. I believe it's A's and B's again during the analysis times that we looked at.
Yes, and then 3 quick comments. One being, if we're not resolving congestion on Hayden Road, I think the comment we're going to hear is that so long as the speed and the volume of traffic remains the same, or even gets worse in terms of volume, all that these improvements will do is simply introduce gaps in the traffic, but will not resolve. The second issue, namely the quality of life for the neighborhood. Related to that are 2 things. One, I thought I heard you saying you're not proposing any sidewalks. So the solution here may appear very vehicular-centered. There's a desire in this community to really balance the modes of transportation, especially around our schools. And then related to that, I think through the design of the other elements of this project, we're gaining in terms of green initiatives. I wonder if the volume of cars that we're bringing here outweighs the benefits that we've gained in the other components of this project.
So, I mean, I do agree that, the green solutions where you promote multimodal transportation, walking, biking, are beneficial in helping to reduce vehicular traffic. But those solutions are system-wide solutions, like building, 500 feet of sidewalk between 2 driveways in and of itself would not solve the problem, right? You need someone on Main Street, if they wanted to walk to the school, they'd be able to get here in an efficient way. And so I know that there's the Trails Committee and other initiatives at play in town to figure out how to create a network of shared use paths and sidewalks through this area as well. And for that reason, what we did, rather than duplicating efforts or kind of come up with contradictory solutions or recommendations to something that's already being thought of and being done for quite some time now in this area, is to make sure that this plan does not preclude those types of solutions from being implemented in the future. So you'll see in some of these areas that there's 12 feet of additional right-of-way that's left out between the widened road and the right-of-way line. There's still about an additional 12 feet left. So if a future project were to consider a sidewalk on the east side of Hayden Row Street in this area, the room is available to do that. It's not like we're not maxing out or using up all of the available right-of-way to build these improvements. We made sure that there's enough right-of-way available for future multimodal improvements to come through. But figuring out what those are or how they connect to the overall system is probably outside of the scope of what we're looking at.
And the levels of service at Chestnut and Hayden Grove
I don't have that right off the top of my head, but I can provide those to you. Yeah. It's in the draft report.
I do think, Norman, I think it's a valuable point to bring up in terms, what I will say is, while it may be bringing more vehicular traffic to this site, we're not creating Hopkinton vehicular traffic, right? That traffic would be going to Elmwood if we didn't put the school here. I do think, and we've talked about it, and some of it is in this report, but it's probably a broader discussion for us and maybe some other boards around how do we get kids back on buses? How do we think about what the new, I believe we passed some new sidewalks on Chestnut at town meeting. What's going to be the potential impact of those on the accessibility? We've talked about some, is there accessibility through the neighborhood behind in the Wild Road area that we could do? So I think it's a point that we all have to really keep in mind that may not be solved just by what's being proposed in terms of this Hayden Row work, but is a broader effort that we all need to undertake as a part of this. So I think it's something important for us to keep in mind, so I appreciate you bringing it up.
VHB's current proposal recommends the 2 crosswalks that have power signalization. That's an upgrade from what's on Hayden Road today. So I think they have responded to increasing the pedestrian connectivity, not just during school hours, but post-school hours to get to those playgrounds or other things. There is a sidewalk introducing all the way from Hayden Road to the front door of Elmwood, and then from Elmwood to Marathon. So there's a lot of linear footage of sidewalks that are included in this base proposal, a significant amount that I don't want to go unnoticed.
And also to your point, the one point I wanted to make is, again, the traffic study does say that the numbers that we're using here for this study are based on the assumption that there's no change in the mode of travel, right? So that's status quo. If 80% parents are dropping off their students today, that's the assumption is 10 years from now, that's what's going to be happening as well. But if that were to change through other initiatives and other plans in town, obviously that'll only make things better along this corridor. Yeah, great.
Well, I know you have to run to another meeting, so we do appreciate you reacting quickly and getting fitting us in, and we will see you on Wednesday.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, you take that.
So for the viewers at home, right, we want to remind everybody that the community forum is Wednesday. It's a virtual forum, so there's links available in order to get to that. I believe it's been posted on the Facebook site and sent out via listserv, I think, through the schools. Yeah, so, looking forward to increased viewership and to answer some of those questions with the public on Wednesday.
You can send it again on Wednesday morning to do that.
And it is a virtual forum, so the Zoom link is available on the flyer and everything, so you don't have to come out to the high school. Just log on while you're making dinner and listen to an update.
And the Zoom link will also be recorded on HCAM at the same time?
Yes, it will. Thank you. One last traffic report question that kind of plays off of Mike's about the how much it's all going to cost. So what are we? I know the answer is going to be that it's not exact, but is there a number carried in that estimate for traffic improvements on Hayden Row? You don't have to tell me what it is.
Yeah,
right
I can look at it.
Is the answer?
We carried a traffic light at the time. Yeah. We thought we might need it, so we did carry it.
You carried traffic improvements in that estimate.
But the
some, not to the extent
the widening of this
shown.
road, we don't have the extent.
Okay.
We didn't.
All right.
We knew we needed something.
Okay. And then I think I'm going to go ahead and boldly speak for the committee and say I think we want to at some point get a sense of like what's of this plan, what are the deltas in terms of if we do the road widening, how much does that increase what we were anticipating potentially spending on traffic, and how much, what was carried, et cetera. Because I think, again, it's going to be really important for the committee to know, and really important for the people at home and the voters to know is, does this traffic stuff take us from an estimate of 170 to an estimate of 180, or does it keep us at 170, or if we don't do a traffic light, does it drop us to 165? Like that's, we need to start getting into that. Even though we know it's still estimates, we need to start getting into that order of magnitude stuff.
Well said, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Maybe talk for a moment about Wednesday.
Sure.
I think there's been some confusion. So I think that there were people who asked whether or not they should go to the high school in person. And I'm not sure that people know that there is an in-person option. I'm not even sure if we know if there was an in-person option or if we were just going entirely virtual.
I believe the plan is to go entirely virtual.
Okay, that's what we thought as well.
Yep,
Okay,
entirely virtual.
That seemed to have our best attendance to date. So we thought, based on this important topic, people could tune in for that segment of it, and it would be easiest through virtual methods.
Yes. This morning there were 2 different flyers out there. We took away the go to the high school flyer and made it all virtual. I just wanted to make sure that we were correct in making it all virtual.
All virtual.
Beautiful, thank you.
Kind of like keep your PJs on.
Okay, that's fine.
And an additional question that I heard was, do I have to be off my camera or share my voice? Can I use the chat feature to ask a question?
You're allowed using the chat feature.
I think we used the Q&A feature.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we can use the Q&A feature. We don't. I think we can give people the option to activate them, and they can ask by voice. But if they prefer to just use the Q&A, which is nice too, because you can throw a question in while someone is talking. So while you're thinking of it, you don't have to keep it, and we'll answer it. But that's either way is fine with us.
Do we have to ask them to identify themselves or their name?
We prefer them to identify, and I'll say that at the beginning, we prefer them to identify themselves with their name and address, just so we know. I mean, it's not a town meeting, so I don't think we like require it, but we'd obviously prefer it to, yeah.
Understood.
Okay, so I'm seeing site design and plan update on the
two slides.
board. Yeah, I mean, technically not on the agenda, but I think given that we're just gonna get an update, and I think we're okay from a OML perspective of just.
The site design, reflects what we'd like to show on Wednesday in terms of the site, what happens on campus. We just talked about what happens off campus.
Let's go for it.
Okay, so I know Ashley will be here at the next building committee to present in more detail updates to the plan, but this we did want to share is responsive to some of what we've heard. So what this shows is some minor adjustments that tighten up the loop road around the school, a little bit tighter to the building. It also reduced some of the front plaza paving, so we've introduced more greenscape. Less paving. And then the outdoor learning spaces are reduced, I believe, down to 3 or 2? 3. 3. So it's been tightened up a little bit, cleaned up a little, but on this plan, what we are showing is the connection road up to Marathon enters a small roundabout to which buses and cars after that roundabout heading towards the Elmwood School would split, and the cars would carry around the back of the building and drop off on the south edge. That's also shared. That's kind of a landscaped pedestrian space that's shared between the car drop and the bus loop. So here we're showing the buses that are intended to have half the fleet between Elmwood and Marathon, so 9 of 18 buses that would queue up. So that hasn't really changed, but it's just a minor little adjustments that inch their way a little bit closer to responsive updates.
Right, so as part of the feedback provided by the committee about being cost conscious, at the fire lane road, as Bob noted, got closer to the building, and you'll note that the recess field in the back is narrowed, really trying to minimize the clearing of the trees and trying to get the footprint back down. To help reduce the overall cost of the project. And so obviously we need to work with the school department to make sure that the changes to the recess field are the right size, but this is the first pass at it. But more so we wanted to show the traffic getting closer to the building, because that is what was going to be presented on Wednesday based on the feedback we received from you at the last meeting.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Any questions about that?
Move on to, can come back to this. As far as the plan, it'll be even harder to see what the changes are, but here we are, again, working to reduce costs, tighten up the building. There's been a small change to the cafeteria stage. We've actually rotated the stage and taken advantage of, taken a little bit more of the white space or lobby space as part of the cafeteria, so we're defining the edge of the caf. That actually tightened up the overall building a little bit on square footage. Unfortunately, that square footage was spent on the stairwells at the very end of each wing. We adjusted the stairwells so that a future addition could be built free and clear of the stair and its landing. So a little bit of trade-off, but we were able to keep from adding any square footage. I think that's it. That's the only change. The stage has the possibility not only opening inside, but potentially opening to the landscape if that were to develop. Right now, we're not showing anything significant out on the front of the building.
So I know this group understands this, but in case there are people watching at home, like I just want to make sure we contextualize. You come every meeting and give us these what appear to be tweaks. They're more significant than that to the design, and I think for somebody who's not as knowledgeable about this process, they're probably sitting there going, just pick an angle of those wings already. Like, why do you keep coming in? Why do you keep... And I think it's important to understand a couple of things. One, the main goal of the design of this building is the educational model. And so what Perkins Eastman is trying to do is really try to make the most efficient design possible that supports that educational model. And in the interim between these presentations, they're looking at ways that they can rethink spaces in here to both maintain or expand that educational model, but also find ways for more efficient design. So I know last meeting when you shared the change in the angles of the wings, that was a pretty significant reduction in square footage in those white spaces in the middle, which amounts to a pretty significant reduction in the cost to build this building. And so I think that's, I'll generously say, I don't think that the coverage of the last discussion necessarily captured that effectively. That what this group and our professionals are doing is recognizing the size of the cost of this building and trying to find every way they can to make sure that we rein that in as much as possible, and that this is not a month to month, this is a day-to-day, week-to-week exercise where we're trying to find every place we can, holding to that thing that we know is most important, which is that educational delivery model, to see where we can find savings. And so I just, on behalf of the committee and the town, we're really appreciative of the constant work, because it's clear that you're hearing us, and we really like to see the impact of that. And I think that what people will be getting out of this is the proposal that will eventually come to town meeting is going to be the most economically responsible proposal that we could possibly make.
I think that's really well said, John. I think that, you know, as you see the design develop, you started at the beginning of this PSR stage only a few months ago looking at just the big box classrooms, and now through all the user meetings you're getting a little feedback about where the tell data closets go, where do the mechanical shafts go, how does this building actually work once you tie everything together, and those are the little moves you see that help improve and nip and tuck at the building with these little updates.
No, and that's an important detail that I overlooked, is the other thing that's happening in the middle is that the Perkins Eastman is meeting with professional staff, with teachers, with buildings and grounds administrators, et cetera, to get to how does this building actually need to work, and then filling that in and tuning the design appropriately. So there's a lot of work that's going on in the middle towards that goal.
Yeah, we have a lot of user meetings every day this week scheduled throughout to get that feedback from both current Elmwood students and then the fourth grade as well, and then other departments in town. Met with police and fire again today, so it's important to kind of churn all that information through, and that'll come back in the finalized plans that come out in July for pricing.
Great. Any other questions or comments about schematic changes?
I do have a clarification. You mentioned you reduced the number of exterior classrooms from, was it 3 to 2, or?
It was originally 4, now it's 3.
Okay. Was that also a cost consideration which helped you shrink the footprint? Is that?
Well, they're the ones in the outdoor classrooms?
The outdoor classroom.
Those ones were exterior, so as part of the previous design presentation to the building committee, that they asked the landscape architect to look at tightening up the overall scope of the outside work.
Yeah.
And so you'll see that in more detail at the meeting next week, but as of now, they've dropped 1, and they're 3.
Just in general, I'm glad to hear and see that you're continuing to optimize it. Do we have a target timeline for the final kind of design and?
It's July.
It's July 12th is the date that the design team will put their pencils down and give it to the 2 estimators to then go through and price it. At the beginning of August, we will present to this committee those 2 numbers. And then you'll have the option if there are things, if the number's too high or too low, or if there are things you didn't like along the way, we can still make some adjustments in August. And then at the end of August, that gets packaged up and sent to the state, and that's the final scope. And that is the 30% completion of the design. It's a schematic design, which is essentially 30% of the overall design. Taxpayers would vote to fund that. And then this committee will still oversee the completion of design. And there will be evolutions, but that's more tweaks, not holistic changes, not adding program at that point.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Okay, then I think we are wrapped on our agenda. So I would seek a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, motion by Shahdool, second by Mike. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous. We don't have Chris here, but I'll count anyway.
I got it,
We have full
7.
vote,
Yeah.
7.
Yeah, I got it.
So thank you everyone for watching tonight. Again, thanks to everyone on both the district and our partner professional staff for rallying so quickly to get to this meeting. A reminder that we do have our next public forum where traffic will be a big topic, so please attend and look to ask your questions about traffic or anything else that you have with regards to this project. That will be on Wednesday, June 7th via Zoom, and you can get that link on HCAM, or we'll be going out in the listserv as well. But also coming up at 7 o'clock, there's a school committee meeting, so don't tune away because you'll want to stay on for that. It's riveting. Thank you, HCAM, and have a good night.